Okay, let's make a painting today. Okay, everybody, welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and we are going to be making a painting today. And we're going to be making another painting by one of my favorite artists, wink wink, her name is Anne Savage. And Anne Savage was one of the great Canadian artists, I think, due for a little bit of reappreciation, because she's probably not the first name that jumps to your lips or your ears when you think of great Canadian artists, but especially during the time when she was alive and at her prime, she was considered to be one of Canada's finest painters by members of the Group of Seven. So we're going to look into this great artist. We're going to give her a little bit of love that she hasn't had as much recently as she deserves. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to show a few things right off the top. The first thing is we have a Facebook group that grows by the day of people who have been taking the class and uploading their pictures, and I see here just wow, oh my goodness, look at that. These are cool. So here's all of the paintings that people have done just based on the recent class, the Hokusai we did just a few days ago. And look at this. Beautiful. Okay, I'm not even going to go into that because we are going to do an episode where I look at your artwork shortly in a few weeks, so I'll cover all that as we go anyway. The other thing, there's a drop, and that Facebook group, there's a link in the description below, so you can find that. There's also the Dropbox if you want to download and print out a copy of today's episode, the image from today's episode. And you'll see in there's a JPEG version and a PDF and then the original. And so here's what it looks like if you download it, and here's the original painting, which we are going to make today. So we'll get to all that in just a couple seconds. I do want to just briefly talk a little bit about who this great artist is so that we have some context while we get going here. So Anne Douglas Savage, 1896 to 1971. So she lived, to the ripe old age of 74, and she was born and raised in Montreal, and passed away in Montreal. She spent the vast majority of her life in and around Montreal. So she did a number of paintings of the countryside around Montreal and small towns in Quebec. She also briefly traveled out west to British Columbia, where I am now, but up a little bit north towards what is now known as the Queen Charlotte Islands, and she was documenting some of the indigenous people that were up there through paintings, just as Emily Carr did. I don't know if there was a relationship between her and Emily Carr, if they had met, but it wouldn't surprise me, just based on Emily Carr was also very good friends with members of the Group of Seven, just as Anne Savage was. So maybe one of you if you've read anything about her, you could fill us in on that, because I'd be very interested to know what the connections were there, or if Emily Carr was in northern British Columbia when Anne Savage was there. I'd be interested to know, because they were both very interested in indigenous cultures and painting them and bringing them to light in a time where it was, people were not interested in indigenous culture in Canada and abroad, really. Or they might have been interested in the culture or the images, but not in the people themselves. And Emily Carr certainly was interested in both, and wrote a number of great books about that. By the way, if you're interested in reading some good books, read Emily Carr's books. But we're talking about Anne Savage today. So, a couple seconds here. What else do I want to talk about? Here's just the Wikipedia article. There are other things online. I found this quote. This might be kind of something interesting for us to think about as we're doing today's painting. Here's Arthur Lismer, one of the founding members of the Group of Seven. He says, "Give that girl a chance and she would be one of the finest painters in Canada." Now, calling this grown woman a girl is a little bit demeaning, but obviously that's a part of the period of time that she was living in. But we'll talk about, because she was a feminist during a time when maybe feminism wasn't a popular. I don't know if she would have described herself as that, but she certainly was an advocate for women's issues, and a number of places we'll talk about her really fighting for or fighting against inequality. So that was kind of a big issue for her, and it plays a big role in her relationship, and we'll get into this, with A.Y. Jackson, who A.Y. Jackson described her in his autobiography, which I have over here somewhere, as the love of his life. So what were her feelings about that relationship? We'll talk about that as we go here. Let me see. Her brother, she was a twin. She was born as a twin, and her brother died in World War I, and that had a profound impact on her, as it would have for anybody. But of course, being a twin, I think that was like a limb being severed. And so after that, she went to art school in Minneapolis. She and then studied in Toronto for a little while. One of her let me see, I'm sort of jumping around here, so I can't find anything. But she studied under Maurice Cullen, who is or was one of Canada's great painters as well. One day, I'd like to do a series of paintings on him, because how influential he was as an artist and obviously as a teacher. So let's take a look at her paintings quickly here, and I'll go back to her biography as we start moving on into her work. But the vast majority of her paintings are landscape paintings. I'm not aware of too many paintings that have people in them, although I'm sure she would have done some while she was studying. And you can see her palette is very similar to members of the Group of Seven, which again is not surprising considering her friendships. So we have this kind of muted colors. I mean, the Group of Seven are famous for really bright colors, but they aren't really as bright, I think, as many people imagine them to be. And so this is, you're looking at these paintings, you would be hard-pressed to tell the difference between her artwork and A.Y. Jackson, for instance, who was one of the arguably the founding member, or the core glue that held the Group of Seven together. And the two of them, Ann Savage and A.Y. Jackson, were lifelong friends. See a few still lifes scattered in and around here, but again, most of these paintings are of the rural countryside around Montreal. So the painting we're going to make today was sold in 2015 for $92,000, which is not a small sum, but considering how much a painting by A.Y. Jackson or Arthur Lismer or Tom Thompson or Lauren Harris would sell for today, it's almost a crime, right? All of those men, their paintings easily sell for in the millions of dollars. I just thought these were kind of interesting. This is on the National Gallery's website, and these are just some images from her sketchbook. So these are, I think it's interesting just to look sometimes at sketches by artists and think about, you know, how simple they are, and then they take these sketches and then they can incorporate them into larger paintings afterwards. Here would be one of her drawings that she made. Does it describe where this was made? It doesn't say, but again, obviously we have these totem poles in a small village in northern British Columbia. Like, I love these little sketches. What does that say? Does it say? I thought that said Kitsilano, but I don't. The canyon, Kitsalis? Maybe that sounds kind of familiar as a northern BC. Very cool drawings. I love these drawings. The Skeena. Now, where's that? That's super familiar. Because my wife and I were up in Haida Gwaii. Was it 2 years ago now? Time is just flying. Okay, let's. I do want to really quickly just mention these two groups of which she was a founding member of, the Beaver Hall group, which was sort of the Montreal version of the Group of Seven, although A.Y. Jackson was a member of both groups because he was also from Montreal. Beaver Hall group, one of the main distinctions was the equal inclusion of men and women artists, which was pretty radical, really, even for today. I mean, for women to be included alongside men at this time was about as radical as you could get, right? Because most women were not really, even at this time, they might be allowed to go to art school, but they weren't. It was sort of like, we'll teach you how to paint, and then when you get married, you can do a little bit of painting while you're, you know, after the kids go to sleep, kind of thing. And they weren't really shown or exhibited much. The Beaver Hall group clearly made it as an important part of their founding. What would you call it? The ideals of that group. Another group which she was a part of was the Canadian Group of Painters, who formed after the Group of Seven disbanded, and many of the members of the Group of Seven also became part of the Canadian Group of Painters afterwards. So, yeah, you could. So, because I think the Group of Seven ended in the late 1920s. The Group of Seven was really only around for about 10, 12 years or something, right? Okay, so let's jump right into the painting, and we're going to start making this as we go. Oh, you know what I want to show you just really quickly here? I just thought this might be interesting. Oh my goodness, that's heavy. I've been just trying to tidy things up a little bit. And so here on this side are all of the paintings that we've made so far. And ideally, over the next few days, what I'm going to do is put each painting, just put them in between a little piece of parchment paper or wax paper, just to prevent the canvas from sticking together. Because one of the things that I've noticed that can happen is if you take two acrylic paintings, here's Claude Monet and Bob Ross, probably the first time they've been face to face like this. If I was to store these paintings like that, face to face, and just let them sit in this box for a couple of years, it's quite likely that I would come down here one day and not be able to pull them apart, that they're going to stick together. And so I'm sure a number of you are like, yeah, well, I'm not planning on sticking my paintings face to face. But if, let's say, there's paint that got onto the back of the painting, and then you do stack them like this, and you leave them for a few years, it's likely that you might be able to pull them apart, but you might tear some of the paint off of the canvas, or some of the stuff that was on the back of this sticks onto this. So if you are looking to save these for a little bit longer, and because very few of you probably have room to hang all of these on your wall, so if you're going to store them, I would first of all store them kind of sideways like this rather than stacking them up, just because that's just the pressure on there gets bigger and bigger. And I'll show you another reason why is, well, maybe I'll get to that in a second. Here's my sketchbooks from the drawing class that I did. If you're interested in the drawing class, you can check out my YouTube page for that. And then here's all my canvases ready to go that I'm going to fill up as we go. So here's a blank canvas that's been pre-gessoed that I put some gesso on. And I do just want to show you, this is another reason why we wouldn't want to stack things on, because I did put this and had a few things stacked on top of it, and you probably can't see it, but you remember I was splattering some paint on top of this at the very end of the last episode. Well, what ended up happening is before it was fully dried, I stacked some other paintings on it, and some of the pieces that were a little bit more dome-shaped got flattened because other things were on top of it, and they ended up looking like little pancakes. They spread out, so I picked them off, including that little, if you remember, I was a little bit bummed out about this one blob that was on Mount Fuji. So it ended up being okay because I picked it off. I'm going to touch that up at some point, but anyway, right? So this is just cheap parchment paper from the dollar store. You can buy archival supplies that are much higher grade and will help the paintings stay preserved for hundreds of years. Cheap parchment paper from the grocery store or the dollar store is not intended to help preserve paintings for generations. So, but it will help keep the paint from sticking to other paint. So, anyway, let's get some paint out. Okay, and my sanding block, and maybe a couple of rags. Whew. I had my heater on because this basement studio gets cold. I find as soon as I start recording these videos, things start warming up pretty quickly. Okay. So, we're going to transfer this image. Again, I've shown many times how to do this, different ways to do this. I am just going to use carbon paper because I could scribble graphite onto the back here and transfer it that way. That way works. I've shown several times how to do that, and it works great if you don't have carbon paper. Right, so you don't need the carbon paper to do it, but it certainly just makes things just a little bit easier. And if you can find the carbon paper at an art supply store, you can order it online. I actually got this carbon paper from a dollar store here in Vancouver. I don't even know why. I don't know really what uses people have for it today, beyond, besides like art making. I wonder if, I mean, maybe somebody else might be able to chime in if you can use it for transferring patterns and sewing, or like, I don't really know what the main use for it other than what we're using it for might be. So anyway, I like kind of bending little corners here, so if I turn this around, it's going to be easy for me to get that off. Okay, so I'm going to transfer this image. Let me just see where my carbon paper is. Okay. So maybe let's look at a slightly different scene here. Okay. So just like the Hokusai, you can transfer everything if you like, or you can transfer kind of every second line. It's kind of up to you. I'm going to sort of just go over some of, like, so let's say this branch here. I'm just going to kind of go like this, because as I paint it, I can kind of outline some of these things. Because once I take this paper off, it's just going to be kind of, those two lines so close together are just going to look like a blob anyway, so. I was even considering just eyeballing this and drawing it onto the canvas. It's not, you know, a particularly complex image really to do that. This is just obviously easier to do, and kind of at this stage of the class, you know, we're at what, episode 38 or something now. What I really want to focus on is the actual act of painting rather than the drawing of paintings, because sometimes it can take us like 30 minutes, 40 minutes just to get the drawing onto the canvas, right? And that's one thing that contributes to these videos being maybe much longer than I expect them to be. Also because I sometimes end up chatting away and talking about history for longer than probably anybody wants me to. Okay. So some of these details in there I don't need. Just every once in a while, good just to check and make sure things are working as we want them to. Yep. For me, it's this kind of this pathway in here, because we have lots of nice overlapping shapes, kind of moving the eye back and back and back all the way until we get to this cabin right back here that I think is, you know, draws our attention. So let me see, let's go to this view here, if anyone's drawing it by eye. I think you can also see in this work, you know, I mentioned I don't know if her and Emily Carr knew, or I'm sure they knew of one another, but had they met, I'm not sure. But just as especially as I'm drawing this or tracing over this painting, I feel like the way that she's drawing these trees and these big volumes, these feels very much like Emily Carr, particularly the paintings she went on to make over the towards the latter third of her life, I guess you'd say. We did obviously do an Emily Carr painting as one of our first paintings. I think it would have been maybe number 10 or something around there. And I focused on a painting she did earlier in her life, which was one of the paintings she made while she was in France and studying art out there. And, kind of a different painting than I think she's really known for. So, part of today's class is a little bit of an opportunity for me to explore a different artist, but also still have an opportunity to look at that's the same kind of approach to painting. Okay. So obviously there's a few more lines, but I'm not going to worry about getting the rest of it in there. Okay. And as always, I could just throw this one away. I don't think it's pretty hard to see. Oh, there you can kind of see a little bit of it. So you can see some of the marks left behind. I'm going to save this. I could probably get another tracing, one more out of that. I think it's been used twice already now. So after about the fourth time, it's kind of useless because then there's no graphite to transfer onto your image. So you could end up having some gaps in the painting. Okay, so let's take this off. Okay, and we won't need that. And now that I'm getting myself organized, it can go right directly into the folder rather than scattered here in the studio. So now let's look at this painting here and think about what we need to do to make this painting. And this is time for a little bit of tea. I haven't got my decaf tea yet, so that's coming. Okay. So I haven't had a chance to really think about how to make this painting, so let's break it down together in real time here. So how will we paint this painting? Good question. So I think there's a few different approaches, just quickly looking at it, that we could take. One approach would be to paint the painting as what I think she did. The way that I think she painted it would have been in a fairly traditional approach, which would have been to paint like a warm brown underneath here, which we did when we did the Claude Monet. We've done it a few times when we did the Morandi. So we've done it a number of times, right? We've painted a warm color across the entire surface of the painting, and that's how virtually every painter, painting in this style would work. Even and the group of seven certainly. If the group of seven didn't prime the canvas with a warm kind of earthy red, then they were either then what they probably were doing is just painting directly onto a panel, which is what Tom Thompson would often do. So there wasn't really a need to paint the painting red or kind of a warm brown, because you're painting on a warm brown piece of wood, right? So so that already had that color in there. So And the reason why I'm thinking she probably painted this warm colors, we see a little bit shining through in a few places there. It's kind of hard to see, but kind of coming through underneath here. You know, kind of looking around some of these edges to see that kind of stuff right underneath. So I think that's, so, you know, I think a lot about, you know, when I'm doing this kind of activity, there's two things that are, there's the kind of warring factions in my mind are, should we try to paint the painting like the artist painted it, or should we paint the painting using what we've been doing in class and building off of that? And then I guess another way to think about it is, can we achieve these same sort of effects in a different way altogether, right? Which is what we kind of did with the Hokusai painting last class, which is clearly completely different approach than the way that he did it, right? And it seemed to turn out pretty well, especially the paintings you guys sent were just mind-boggling. So the other instinct that I have in order to paint this would be to possibly use some blue as a background to create for this cold temperature kind of a painting. And I could see someone painting a cool blue in the background and then making a gradient all the way to a warm blue at the bottom, and then painting some cool blue over top of it. So, but you know, I do think it's so hard to, I think, so and I was thinking about this earlier today, because I'm sure many of you have that question. It's like, I don't really know, like, it's hard for me to understand, like, if we're going to layer two colors on top of one another, which color should be on top and which color should be on the bottom. Well, generally, it's pretty easy to discern what color you want on the top, right? So we see this cool blue up here, and we see some warm blue down here, right? And there's a lot of cool blue on this tree, right? So that's pretty obvious. So then it's like, what do we want the underlying color to be? Do we want this painting to feel really cold, or do we want this painting to have like an inner warmth despite the cold, right? And if we think about, this kind of reminds me of the, oh, did I bring it down here? It reminds me of the Thomas Kincaid painting that we did, right? Where we put down an actual, let me see if we look at this, we put down a warm yellow. I think we put warm yellow underneath the whole painting, and then I painted cool yellow over top, because one of the things Thomas Kincaid wanted is he wanted all of his paintings really to have this radiating warmth coming from inside of the painting, right? So he was always using warm color underneath, even if he painted cool colors on top. So again, do we want this same sort of effect in this painting? So we have, because think about how it changes your perception of the painting. If we have a cold landscape with, you know, snow on the trees, and yet there's warmth coming through it, then it feels like, it's sort of like, yeah, it's cold, but there's like this warmth of this tiny little house in the middle of this countryside, and maybe like smoke coming out of the chimney. There's a, you know, fire on the fireplace, and somebody's making some hot beans and cold or warm tea and coffee and eggnog with some little bit of whiskey or something in it. Or do we want the opposite feeling? Do we want it to feel like, whoa, this is a cold, uninviting landscape, right? So which way do we want to proceed is the question. I think maybe I'm going to go for a cold landscape. We did the Thomas Kinkade with the warm radiating energy coming from inside. I think I'm going to go for the exact opposite with this painting. Since we've kind of done one approach once, I'm going to do the opposite. So it's not going to be like Anne Savage's painting. However, if you want, you could paint this warm red or warm brown, and then put that on the background. And I know some of you are thinking, oh no, he's going to do two paintings again. I'm just going to do one. Anyway, so that's my. I don't know if that was at all helpful to understand my thinking about this, but because it's kind of hard to express these things which sometimes just occur to me naturally, you know. And that's part of sometimes being a teacher, is to like, how do I explain this thing that I kind of intuitively understand from years of doing this stuff. And I think by the end there I made some sense. It just took me a while to get around to it. And sometimes I think about these things in advance, and I've got it all sorted out in my mind before class starts. Today I didn't, so you have a window into my thinking there. And so I see Donna says I pick warm, right? So I would be that's what I love about the fact that we have this Facebook group and you guys are making paintings, contributing to it, is we have an opportunity to see alternative approaches to the same artwork, right? So I'll do, if I'm going to do a cold one, I'd be super interested to see how the warm paintings look. Okay, so I got my paint on my canvas. Obviously I'm going to need a bunch of white because this is a snowy landscape. But as we've seen, even if you're not painting a lot of, what do I do, this big gob of white, I'm just going to put it there for right now. Even if you're not painting a snowy landscape, having some, using white is, you're going to use a lot of white regardless. Because if you just had bright colors, it would just be like a candy store painting. It would look like a Lego set, right? Way, way too bright. Okay, so now the question is, how cold do I want to make this? Because I could mix a cold or a cool brown, right? So I could mix cool yellow, cool blue, and cool red, and I could make a brown and put that brown in behind, which I did with the Hokusai last time, right? So we saw that, and then I could paint over top of that on... The other thing, which would be way more radical, would be to go right to the cool blue. That might be a bridge too far. Now that I'm thinking about it, that might make this painting look super, super blue. And Deborah says, we are in winter here. I want warm, LOL. Okay. I think, you know what? I'm going to paint... I'm sorry, this is... I'm going to paint a cool blue throughout. Or cool brown throughout. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm going to... I think if I go too cold, this painting is going to look like an alien landscape. And I don't want to go quite there. But just some of the clues I'm thinking about is that this house does not look like it's occupied at the moment. Lights are off. There's no smoke coming out of the chimney. So it doesn't feel like this is, you know, I don't see footprints around here. So it feels like this is a you know, a colder kind of space. Anyway, blah 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 blah. How much time did I chew up doing that? Okay, so let's take some of the cool blue and the yellow. I'm gonna mix this green here. And now I'm going to take some cool red. Okay. So that's a nice cool brown, right? Nowhere near as light as we did last class, but we're not quite done yet because I want to add more cool yellow into here. And actually, I'm just going to drop some white right into this. That might be a little too much, but let's mix it up here. Okay. So right now, this is too greenish. Let's put a little bit of red back in here. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some water, because I'm going to paint over all my pencil lines, and I want to be able to see some of these pencil lines. So I'm just going to squeeze some of this paint back out again. Get lots of water in here. So this should make it adequately thin enough that you should be able to see through the paint. And okay. So I guess part of like that long spiel I just gave, what I was really sort of thinking about is not just how I want the painting to look like, but what do I want people to feel while they're looking at the painting, right? Do I want them to feel like, oh, what a lovely, warm, kind of wintry scene in the country? Or do I want them to feel like, oh, I've been there, oh, walking through the countryside in Canada in the middle of, you know, January, and my feet are wet, and my gloves are wet, and my nose is cold. I got snot dripping from my nose. I can't wait to get home. So that is what I think is really fun, is when you, at this point in in your sort of experience learning about art, is I think you now know enough about how to mix paint and how to paint different things, and it starts getting into more specific things of like, well, what do you want to say? What do you want people to feel when they're looking at the art? And how can we manipulate the painting in different ways, just by using the color that is going to subtly, almost unconsciously shift the viewer's reaction to the artwork. And I think that's what's really exciting. When you start, because that first, you know, we're going into our 5th month of this class, right? And it takes a while for us just to get the basic skills and techniques down, right? And we're just like trying to figure it out. And then once we start figuring it out, then we can really start expressing ourselves and not just replicating the paintings, right? Which is going to be what the kind of part 2 to this course will be about, is like taking the knowledge we have and applying it to other things, right? To things outside of images that already exist out there, and start making our own images, which is going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. If you're excited with what we've done so far, then the next step to this course will be exploring your individual kind of expression. So hit the subscribe button, mash that notification bell, go over to Facebook, join the Facebook page or the Facebook group. Okay, so this is still drawing. This would be obviously a very different if I used a warmer color to do this. Just looking at some of the comments. Shelly says, I have to say, we had rain today, which we normally have, -40 right now, so it's a little different than our territory. Definitely no palm trees. Oh my goodness, palm trees. I can't even imagine a palm tree right now. Deborah says, okay, I'll go cool blue. Dan Donna says, it almost looks like my house, and I lost my drawing. Oh, lost your drawing. I lost all my drawing. I wonder what happened there, Donna. So this is still a little bit wet. I forgot to bring my hairdryer. I have a hairdryer, but it's in my office on campus, and I haven't been back to campus in since last April. So a lot of my tools are still stuck in boxes prior to the whole pandemic. So anyway, what's the next step to this painting? What are we going to do? Well, as soon as this paint dries, in an extra couple minutes here, I am going to start working my way from the background towards the foreground. So I'm going to start doing some stuff up in this area of the painting, and we'll start laying in some of the cool colors. I'm also gonna, I think I'll be able to use some of this color up here to even do some of these big volumes of trees, and also I'll be able to use some of that for some of these darker areas too. And then as I come down here, because this is mostly gray, right? This painting is, we're going to use, so I'm going to need some black on my palette as well. But we'll be using mostly grays with cool blue, and then as we get closer to the bottom, we're going to start replacing the cool blue with more warm blue. Now, and then we may go over afterwards and put some cool blue, little touches of it into the foreground. So you notice how all of this area here, we've got very cool icy blue colors up top. And then as we go down here, there's very little of that. There's little touches of cool blue in the tree here, a little bit down here, and but there's less and less of that cold color as we get closer to the foreground. This color here appears to be kind of a combination of cool and warm blue. All right, and then we've got some red in like so not only does this gray, as you get closer to the front, starts to warm up a little bit with a little bit of brown in the gray. Okay, let me see how we do. Almost done. So let's move this to the side and let's start mixing some colors here. So the first thing I want to do, let's get some black, and see how little black we need? That's probably, I could probably do most of this painting with just that black. Oh, you know, also, I was going to mention, which buys me just another extra second with the background. This is the paintbrush that was all stiff and dried up last episode. And remember, what I did to help that is I just took it and left it in my paint jar here, or my water bucket for the entire class. And after the episode aired, I took it and I used this substance. I think I've mentioned this before. I thought that I still had this also with all my stuff at the university, but I guess I think I haven't. Maybe I bought 2 of them. But anyway, this here is great for getting paint off of. I use it for getting paint off of like concrete and floors, and you could put it on your clothes, but it could strip the color out of your clothes. So just FYI, but it is kind of miraculous. Like if you get it onto a surface. Anyway, so I just sprayed a bunch into here and had like maybe a finger worth of the spray in this little cup, and then just let it sit in there for about 5 minutes, which is more than enough time because it does its magic pretty quickly. And then afterwards, I took it and then washed it very thoroughly. Like you wouldn't want to drink that material. It also has a bit of a smell too, so you want to have a window open when you're doing that. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that because I've rescued this brush from. It's my zombie brush now. It has lost its shape a little bit, which is a little bit frustrating. But you know, if I'm using it for just doing background stuff like a wash, then it's not such a problem. Okay, so let's do a gray, and we're going to add a little bit of cool blue for the background here. So taking my white, and let's just mix this together. You can buy a tube of gray paint, which if you're doing a lot of landscape or portrait photography, or not portrait photography, but portraits or even still lifes, you may want to consider buying a tube of just gray paint, because it could save you some time mixing. Personally, however, I'm just a big advocate of mixing paint when you need the paint, because I think the more and more you just use your knowledge to mix the paint to get the colors you want, the better you're ultimately going to be. Now, if I was making a mural out of this image, then I would go buy some gray paint, because I don't want to be spending all this time mixing gray all the time when I could just squeeze it out of the tube. But I also like that every time I mix a color, it's going to be just a little bit different. And I like that differences. I like it when the paint has variety throughout the composition, so it's not all one big flat color. We will, this time next week, we're going to be talking about an artist named Takashi Murakami, probably one of the most famous living artists around. And you have seen his work, whether you know it or not, especially if you like Louis Vuitton, right? Anyway, or you may like it but not be able to afford it, but you're certainly aware because he has played a big role in fashion beyond just art as well. Anyway, so I'm going to take this gray, and actually I might as well just mix some of this right in here. Right, so I'm now turning this gray into a cool gray. And I can actually paint this color in many, many places. So you see what I'm doing? I don't just dip my brush in here. I like to get my brush and really get the paint thoroughly on the brush and make sure all the bristles are nicely covered in paint. Okay, so now let's take a look at this painting. Look, it's like nice and dry. And I can I want to now start applying this gray wherever I think I may need it. So this is a little bit of a darker gray at the moment. So here's, I'm just going a little bit around to kind of, because I can't see, I don't want to obscure all of my pencil lines here. This is some sort of a bush here. And obviously, as I transferred this image onto the canvas, there's a little bit of a border, right? So I'm just going to extend the picture over. It means I'm going to have to use my imagination to come up with a little bit of the material that's no longer there, but that's all right. So a little bit of this is just me fiddling around and laying some paint in, not exactly sure where everything is going to go yet, but I think some of that will be even darker here. Okay. So now I'm going to kind of start moving a little bit down. It's almost like a, you can go in whatever direction you like, but I'm kind of being like a little bit of a, like a computer printer and looking for, while I've got this darker color in my brush, what are some areas that I can apply this color in? So it's kind of like some of these areas in behind this tree that are going to get a little darker. Okay. So right now I'm just looking at the original painting and thinking, okay, I can always darken them and I can always lighten this as I go. So, and I can paint over these tree branches as well, but I want to sort of preserve some of that so that I can find my way later on, right? Let's see, maybe I'll paint a little bit of this right here. Oh, like I just noticed, oh, that's actually supposed to be a bit of a brighter white there. Well, that's fine. As I've mentioned many times before, my goal is not to replicate the paintings exactly. It's just to... the experience and the pleasure of painting is what we ultimately want to have a lot of, right? Okay, so that's a great start. Now I'm going to take my brush here and I'm just going to mix a little bit more blue in, because sometimes as I go the blue starts to dilute a little bit. Let's maybe just get a little more white in there. See how much brighter that is. Okay. Usually if there's overlapping things, I might try to just change that color just a little bit so that it is a little bit brighter or darker. You know, this part of making a painting I really enjoy. It's kind of just a little bit of a mindless work here. I find this part of the painting is where I'm just sort of filling in color and kind of having a little bit of fun. I'm sort of casually looking at the original, but not super closely. If I get some of these things so-called wrong, I'm not gonna fret over it. I may not even bother correcting it as I go. See how there's slight different changes in the color? I like that. I want that to happen. Alright, so it's still a little bit wet. You can even do a little bit of blending with these colors. I am tending to get a little bit brighter as I'm moving forward in the painting. Just because colder or the gray tends to kind of want to push things backward. So the more white that kind of gets into, it's a little bit too much, the more it will appear to kind of come forward. Again, there's going to be some white coming back in all of these places, but so you see as I get closer to the front here, I start getting more and more white. That means I am obscuring a bit of my pencil lines, but I got the general shape, and then I can kind of eyeball some of that other stuff as we go. Darken a bit under here. And it's just nice to put a little bit of variation and just kind of going back over a few things. This is good so far. Now I'm going to just add a little bit more black, and we'll get some of the darker areas of this painting. Again, with the cool blue. So I add black, but I'm also adding a lot more cool blue in here, because it's going to be a darker anyway. That might have been a little too much. So let's just see. There we go. It's pretty dark, maybe verging on too dark, but okay, I'm just getting the back side of that canvas. These trees here. She's also painting with a bit of a dry brush style at times as well, so you can see I'm not too concerned about the colors sort of matching up and creating nice puzzle pieces. I don't mind if there's a bit of like the little gaps kind of showing between some of the colors. That's kind of a part of her working process, so I can embrace that. So this part of the painting was cut off here, so this is my own imagination coming into play there. Pretty happy with all of this so far. So I think what I'm going to do next is, I just want to get a little bit of gray back on here. Maybe even let's make it a little more white. You know what? I think I want to get a little bit of this house. Do I want to do that now? I'm gonna wait for a couple seconds before I start getting into some of these details, because I'm gonna now put in some warmer blue and start building back up here, and then I'm gonna go back in and do the branches on the trees. So right now this is a pretty cool painting, right? It's cool, but it's also a very cold painting. I've got this, obviously the cold brown, and now I've got a lot of cold gray on this painting. So now I'm going to start warming it up down from the bottom. So I'm going to mix a new gray. Let me actually just wash this brush. So I'm just going to scoop out some of this paint. Let's do this right here. We don't have as much paint on the bottom, so this and a little bit of right. So can you see the difference between these two grays? The first one we did almost has a bit of a greenish quality. Like, it's super subtle, but it's like a, as soon as I start mixing some white, if I was to put some yellow in it, we'd really see it go green very quickly. Versus, I don't know if you could see this, has a bit more of a purple quality, right? So like, that's how we can tell the cool and the warm paint apart from one another. And it's not an easy thing. It takes years to really be able to spot it. But I'm always looking to see where are the warmer or the cool colors in here. Okay. So I got this hill right here. Guess it's kind of and it gets even more red in here. I might do that as a little bit of a wash over top. We'll see how this goes. Add a little bit more white to it. So he's got this. Oops, let's show you that. Just painting a little bit of slightly warmer white on top of some of this cooler blue. A little bit more white again. I'm just going to darken that a bit. Just blend this in a bit. I can always, I'm going to do more layers on top of all this as we go, but so I've got a little, just introducing a little bit more blue into this mixture here. This area underneath here. Again, you can see I'm departing a little bit from her work, just mostly just up for the sake of moving a little bit quicker while I've got some of these paints on here, and to kind of also continue teaching what we've been working on. But come back, add a little bit more white in here. So just going to add a little bit of black into here, so it's, I still have my warm color, but it's not just so blue, it's also a darker gray. Okay. So just finishing this off a bit. I think I want a bit more of that other blue in behind here. Actually, well, just before I move on, I do want to, let's get a bit of bit of this warm blue into the path. Okay. And actually, well, I'm going to mix. I want this same gray here, but I'm still just going to keep this blue that was on my palette before. Just trying to integrate getting things a little bit darker as we go. Okay. Next up, I'm going to do the water at the lake and finish that, and then we'll do the branches in here. And then I think when the branches start coming in, the painting's gonna start coming together really quickly, because right now it just looks like a bunch of weird blob shapes. What are we looking at? Those trees and the trunks, and even this building and what are these, like posts from the fence, really start giving a lot more structure. And I think that's going to be like, oh, okay, phew, I thought we were lost there for a minute. Okay, so we're going to mix the ice. I just need a little more white here. So it's this little tiny pond out front here that we're going to focus on next. So I got my white. We're going to add just a little bit of black. Turn it a bit of a gray. Not too much. Let's add some of the cool blue and a bit of the warm blue. Alright, that's a nice color. And there's this fence area part of the fence, but I'm just going to paint right over top of it. Now she has the that is definitely very blue. I can always I'm gonna probably go over that with a little bit of warm blue later on, but I think I'm gonna should I extend this? I'm gonna put a little bit of the water coming in underneath here. I know this is not what she did. It's just I feel like that I want it to. I feel it's just weird how it just disappears there. That's just me. Okay. I can still take this, and I'm going to put it on the house back here. So you see how interesting that is? This is the same color from my brush. Look how different it looks here. When it's surrounded by these lighter colors, it's like, wow, it's so bright. And then I paint it back here, and it sort of blends in a lot more. That goes to show you that how color changes depending on the colors that surround it. So you could spend your whole time trying to mix the right color, then you paint it onto the canvas, and it just changes. And you're like, whoa, what happened? Where'd that color go? So much so that I think I may, as we go here, go over it with a little bit more cool blue to make it pop a little bit more, just as I might make this a little bit more subtle. Okay, so I think maybe just before I wash my brush, I'm just going to get a little bit darker here. The same color. I'm just going to put this on the roof. It's going to be even darker in here. Where that smokestack is going to be. I got a bit of this left over anywhere else. That before I wash this brush. You can't really go wrong when you're doing this kind of thing in terms of where you're putting paint, and you can okay. Coolio. Oh, I think I did want to put so it does feel maybe a little, there's a little bit too much warm blue in the bottom, so much so that it's actually warming the picture up too much. So I will eventually dial that down a bit, but I'm going to now go into the trees here. So Deborah says, I really like the way you're doing the blue, Michael. All my pencil marks are gone, so I have to draw the painting again. So, not to miss anything, I'll do this tomorrow. I can totally understand if you get the painting to this point and you feel a little bit lost because it's like, uh-oh, I can't see where any of the pencil marks go. I would say, though, if you've got the basic shapes, like we've got kind of a basic tree here, we've got a basic lake here, you know, obviously all my fence posts are gone, a lot of the structure has disappeared, but that also gives me clues as to where things are going to go again, right? So Another way that you could have approached this is maybe by painting some of the darker areas first. We could have done that. I just find if I do that, I end up painting over them a second time because then I have... Anyway, she probably would have painted some of those darker areas first herself and then gone over it, but she has more time than I do. Anna says, I have a lecture now, so I'm signing off, but I can't wait to finish this tomorrow. Thanks for joining us, Anna. Okay, so... this kind of painting might also be a fun painting to use some of your slow dry medium. When you're painting, if your intent is to paint kind of quickly and try to get the whole painting done all at once, actually having some of the slow dry medium can help because the paint you can blend some of those colors a little bit. Okay, so I think it's time for... I've had tea steeping for an hour and a half now. Just about strong enough for my taste here. This is my tea steeping method here. I love these little trays. Of course, it's tempting fate by holding it over top of my painting, but it's always, whatever mistake you make in a painting is always an opportunity, right? There's always the possibility of doing something a little bit different because of having made that so-called mistake. You know what's funny? I've just cleaned this brush. I went through the whole ordeal of explaining, and then I just left it on the table there. So I'm just going to let it sit there. Some habits die hard, right? Okay. So let's now mix our brown for the trees. I'm going to... We could use some of the cold brown we had from before, but it's got a lot of white in it. So I'm just going to mix a new brown. Oh, this needs to be clean. And I'm going to use a warmer brown this time. Okay. So to do this, it just takes a big scoop of my warm yellow. I'll probably use, well, I won't use all of it, but... and some warm red. Alright, so I've got a nice fire engine orange here. It's fire engine red, right? I don't know why it's... Anyway, it's a good orange. Okay. And now I'm going to take some of the warm blue, right? Put that in here, and boom, we got a brown, just like that. Nice brown, too. If we want it to be a little bit darker, is that a little bit more blue? Now, if I put this on the painting right now, I think it's going to be both too light and too saturated. All right, so it needs to be darkened down a little bit. So there's two ways it can go, one of which is I can add a little bit of the cool blue in here. And now that's sort of pulling that color back towards the neutral core a bit, and dulling it down, and darkening it. Alright, so if I just put that side by side, you'd see the difference in those two browns, right? And I could use both of them in different places if I wanted. I think that might be dark enough right now. If I want to darken it and put some black in it, I have that option. But I don't want to go super dark just yet. Okay. So I'm going to use my larger brush just for a little bit here to get some of the basic structure in. As I come back down to the ground, I'm sort of pushing a little bit harder with the brush. I could see myself actually going darker with that brown. That brown still feels... doesn't feel like it's cold enough, right? So let's put a little bit of black into this mixture after all. So just dark enough that I like. You also see when I'm doing that, I allow the brush, my hand to kind of wobble a little bit, just to kind of give it a little bit more, less robotic kind of quality. So let's see, this one is this big tree coming down there. That's okay. If you got a little glob like that, well, you know, here's an opportunity to turn it into another branch. So already my painting is going to be, I can see it changing before my eyes from the original. I think this might have been because the painting ended here, and this is something I've added on top of it, so that's maybe why I'm getting a little confused over my own drawing. So don't be worried if something gets a little bit too wide or whatever. We can go back and paint leaves or clumps of leaves as she's got here over top of some of these things. Okay, so let me see. We have this here. I think there's a big tree branch like that. So you can see there. I don't mind some of that kind of dry brush quality happening. I like it, and I kind of try to encourage it. But if you want your the lines to be sort of thicker and to be more what would be the word? Less transparent, have more volume, then you could just go over it a few times until you sort of get the branch the way you like it. Right, so that thing I'll probably fix the thing I just did there. A lot of branches in here. Kudos to her for really doing all these details. Often when I'm doing trees, I like really oversimplify things. She really tried to get it all in there. So every once in a while you just have to kind of mix a little bit more paint. Right, and let's put a little bit more each of these blues in there. A little dab of black again. So you see how the painting just starts to kind of come back here as we get a little bit more structure going on. I think there's a bit of a sigh of relief, like, oh, okay, I was a little worried there for a bit. I love drawing and painting trees. I think I mentioned it in my drawing class, but I sometimes go to, when the world was normal, before everyone had to stay at home for months and months on end, I would go to, here in Vancouver, we have a place called Van Dusen Gardens. And I go there in the summer. It's a beautiful garden in the summer, but it's open year round, or at least it was. And I would go there and sketch in the middle of winter. And I remember one time one of the groundskeepers, she came up and said, like, oh, we don't see very many people sketching in the winter. And I said, like, this is my favorite time to draw trees because there's none of those pesky leaves in the way. All right? Okay. So I'm going to put one of these fence posts back in here. I'm going to do the other side of it, which will be lighter, with a different brown here in a bit. But and I think is this another one right here? This one here. Going off into the distance. Okay. I keep on putting more and more branches on here if I want. I am gonna kind of call this a little bit short soon here just because of time. But you can, you know, put the branches however you like. Like, what I like about painting branches is just like, you know, there's no right or wrong way, unless you're like a botanist and you've been studying certain kinds of trees, or you're a gardener and you know everything there is to know about these plants and you want to try to get it bang on. But for me, I'm more interested in just the form rather than getting the anatomy of the trees perfect. So you really can't put too many branches on these trees, because if you're not happy with them and you think there are too many, you just paint over them. Which is what we'll do shortly. So you can kind of see maybe why, hopefully, why I didn't paint all this first, is that I would have to go back over a lot of this, and it could be really time consuming, so. Okay, so now I'm going to go on top of, I'm going to actually add a little bit more gray. So this area here I want to darken down, because I've got this kind of nice layer, but I want to add a little bit more shadow into some of these places. But I don't want to use the same brown I've just done, because if I paint this brown on some of this area here, it's going to launch these trees right forward, because there's a lot of black in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some gray to this brown. I'm going to mix it a little bit to the side here. So I got some white here, a little bit of black. So I got my gray. And now I'm going to scoop in here. Just add a little bit more black here again. Okay. Well, I need to get a little bit more cool blue in here. So it's just a little bit more gray to kind of, so that it sits further back in the painting. Ideally, I should have left a little bit more of this blue. Let me just scrape. Bit of a halo on here. That tree being a little bit closer. I can paint this in the window as well. And a little stripe of this top of the house. Chimney. Cool. Getting there, step by step. Just put a bit of this there. I'm just going to fudge a little bit into this area underneath the tree. Just adding a little bit of detail into the shadowy areas here. Okay, so now I'm just going to take that color and add even a little bit more gray. Just come into here. Okay. So now I can start really refining this and adding more kind of line work onto the painting. And just taking colors and just giving a little this like this dark and just adding it in a few different places, like to make some of these shadowy areas. Right, so my brush is kind of dry right now, just going over a few of those little spots. I can even just take it and just gently go over something like that. I don't know, do I want to keep that? Let's keep it for now like that. It's a little bit too dry up front. Okay, I'm gonna go back to this brown and finish these stumps. You know what, before I do that, I could get just this little ridge here. That's helpful. Okay. Donna says, is Van Dusen Garden in Queen Elizabeth Park? No, that is, what do they call that? Bloedel Conservatory. Bloedel Conservatory is at the top of Queen Elizabeth Park. It's in that dome, geodesic dome on the top of the park. Van Dusen Garden is nearby, kind of, they're both around 30, like, mid-30s streets. Van Dusen Garden is off of Oak? Is it Oak or Granville? I can't remember. I think it's Oak and like 30th or something. It's like a big sprawling park that reminds me a lot of the Huntington Gardens and Museum in Los Angeles. If you've ever been there, it's where I grew up. Or, I didn't grow up there, but I spent my entire 20s in Los Angeles and spent a lot of time there sketching. Okay. Peter says Van Dusen is Oak and 37th. There you go. So now, if we look at this painting, I would say we're probably 3/4 of the way. And now it's just sort of up to you how much more detail you really want to put in here. So, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to add some white onto the leaves. And then I'm going to outline it with a little bit of the cooler blue. And then we'll see where we are at that point. Okay. So I'm going to mix another gray. It's just going to use a little bit bigger brush for mixing here. So remember I said all I needed was that little bit of black. That's pretty much used all of, but I managed to make this whole painting with just that little blob of black. Okay, I need a more white. Lot of white in here to the point where there's just barely any gray in there whatsoever, or any black. But I think that we want to reserve the pure white for just a few places. Even though it's snow on the ground, I think a lot of people think, oh, it's snow, we're just going to go nuts with the white. But then it's just too bright. So let's see, this is what I just mixed. And now I think everything's pretty dry. We can go up here and we can add some kind of like these leaves hanging over the top. Look like these big dewdrops. Might be a little bit too much white for that part, but I want this top of this tree to be a little bit brighter. Just fade it out by blending, letting it a little dry up there. Oh, she does have a whole bunch of little leaves here, so let me see. We can do this a little bit faster, just I'll outline those a bit. I kind of like the way that looks. Let's just do that a few more times. All right, you can kind of cover up certain parts there. A big clump of trees or leaves in front of this tree here. Roof there. Where's another thing here? Wow, is that our daughter running around upstairs like that? That is wild. I don't know if you can hear it, but she's getting faster and faster. I have to put her in a running program, burn off some of that energy. My goodness. She's only 16 months, well, 17 months. My goodness. Okay, so how much more of that do I want to do here? I could, let's just put a little more here. of this. Let's paint in here. Okay. So what's nice is all those colors from behind that kind of mix in and around with the colors that we're painting now. There's a little bit of white, kind of gray. It just makes this painting super special. It's the complexity, I think, of paintings that generally I appreciate personally. Because you can keep on looking at them over and over again and see more and more things. A little bit of kind of painted over that one area, and I kind of just want to look a little bit of little shadowy area there, so it's not just one big blob. There's some structure happening there. Okay, where's my tea? Oh, here it is. Right next to me. So, if we look at this, I'm happy with all that. I do feel maybe that up there is maybe a little dark. So I can paint over that and just lighten it up a little bit. This blue, I think I'm going to have to just alter and just tone down, because it starts to look a little bit like ocean blue, right? I had too much blue in my gray. So let's just clean these paintbrushes off. Donna says, keep putting my arm in my red paint. I'm going to take a break and just watch for a few minutes. I know what that's like. You're dragging your sometimes your sleeve drags into the paint and gets all over the picture. And you don't even notice for a while. It's one thing to notice, and you can immediately kind of try to wipe some of it away. It's when the worst part is when it happens and you don't even notice it dries, and you're just happily painting away in a corner, and then you not the most pleasant of feelings. Okay, so let's I'm gonna just get rid of a little bit of that blue here. So let's mix a dark gray. And two ways I can go about this is to completely paint over it. I could do it with a different color entirely. I could do a wash. Let's just see. I think that's going to work okay. I'm not going to paint over every little bit of it, because I kind of like it, but it was just too much. Right, see how that just makes a bit of a difference, right? It's all the difference that was needed. Okay, so much so that I think I'm going to take a bit of this and put this into this water down here that I got. Change that up a bit. Might have been... Is that too much? I kind of liked that, but maybe... Let's just see if I can wipe a bit of it away. Still kind of just dabbing a bit of that paint off, so it looks a little bit dirtier, not quite as bright. Okay. Let's see. What are we looking at here? I really like what she's done in here, but I want to kind of start getting closer to wrapping up. So, I mean, I'm not going to do all those beautiful kind of dangly parts of the trees there. I'm going to do a little bit of it. I want to do a bit of it, but not all of it. Good taste is all we need. You know, I think I probably should have put a little bit of white. Okay, I can fine-tune a few of those details as we go here. I want to add some of this cool blue into this mixture and do... Let's see, might need a little more white. A.Y. Jackson joked that he claims in his autobiography, which I read fairly recently, that he... I can't remember now I'm trying to remember the story, the detail, but that he, I think, mistakenly got a shipment of too much white paint because, it's because A.Y. Jackson went up to northern Ontario for a few times with some scientists, and in preparation for that, he brought a bunch of white paint with him. And I think he brought too much, or I can't remember the exact details, but he sort of joked that that's why he ended up, for the rest of his life, painting lots of snowy scenes, because he just had so much paint. Okay, so I realized I think I need to get a little bit more blue on here. It's just too white, and it needs to kind of make a little bit more of a contrast from... That's too much, so kind of just go back. Right, so it's a little checking and correcting here. There we go. I think I'm going a little bit heavy on this blue. I don't mind it, however. So, again, that's a little bit, I could go, well, now that I'm looking at it, I think hers actually has gone the opposite way. She's got a lot more white than this blue, but I kind of like the way mine looks right now, so I'm just going to roll with it. You make your own decisions as you will anyway, but if you're wondering why it looks a little different than the original, that's why. So it just kind of gives it this real icy quality, right? This cold blue. Switch to a smaller brush as we start going further into the background. She's got more stuff happening in that area, which I don't have. She's got a lot more branches and things. However, I'm just going to continue along. Get a little bit of white up top here. So got some kind of outlining happening up there. So now we're starting to kind of approach the end here. And to finish off, get this tree in the foreground done. just going to add a few these little strokes of kind of grayish. Am I going to need a little? Oh, I got a little bit of black left in there. Okay. These are a little dark underneath here. And I'm going to take a bit of warm blue into the gray. I'm going to need a little speck of blue. I thought it was, or black. Thought I would be able to get through this with just that little bit, but it's just not happening. Okay. There's definitely some stylizing that I'm doing here. And there's no law against it, right? Might have been a little intense. You can always dial that down. That one. Do I want something up here? Just gonna give it a bit of some trees up here, or leaves up here. That's part of the tree. And let's give some leaves right here. Again, part of this kind of painting ends right here, so I've kind of trimmed a bit of that off on the sides. Okay. I was going to lighten that background up just a tad. I felt it was a little intense, so I'm going to do that right now. Need some more white. Thanks, Paula, for the donation through the super chat. That's awesome. If you, like Paula, want to support the show, I would be very grateful for any contribution. If you want to leave a PayPal donation. There's a link to the PayPal in the video description below. There's also, if you want to send a check or money order, send me a message through Facebook. The link to my Facebook is below, and I'll send you any details you like there. So yeah, I'm not going to paint over everything. Just feel like it needed a little bit lightening up. And a bit of just like kind of adding a little bit of these slightly different color, especially if there's areas where everything is the same gray. Just taking a slightly different gray, going and adding a couple little dabs here and there, kind of just give it enough variation that it doesn't feel too much of like a big blob. So I'm just going around and try to filling up a few places where. So I'm going to finish off by doing a little more brown on the trees and just kind of bring back some areas I painted over a bit. Connect these here, and then we'll be done. YouTube isn't as stable as I'd like it to be. Okay, so I'm going to mix a warm brown again. Okay, it's a nice dark brown. So I'm going to take a small brush. Thanks for joining me, Paula and Deborah. Okay. Just going around and touching up the tree. Not over everything, but just parts of the tree that I want to bring back out. And this is a slightly different brown, so it might kind of pop in a few places, which is kind of nice, having it being a little bit darker, or a little bit more brown, I should say, less gray. So this actually will work really nice in the foreground here, so might add just a few more branches here. Okay, so if I want to connect these to here, let's say I have just gently drawing them in. That definitely kind of helps, right? Putting some of those on there is a really nice effect. It's too dark. Don't just painted yours gray and then you're going to start it all over again? Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what's great about acrylic painting is it's just a painting. And if it doesn't turn out the way you were expecting, you can just paint over it and try again another day. And life marches on. It can be a little dispiriting, but if you are, if you can recognize that you have also learned a lot, even despite that, not working out the way you wanted, then it's not such like a loss, a total loss. Okay, I think I'm all. What else do I want to do here? Part of me wants to put a little bit of of icy green right there, which could be a little dangerous, especially when you're close to being done here. So let's just see. Snow piled up on the tops of here. A bit more gray in there. So I just raised that so that that kind of flows in behind there. Okay, so much, I just like fiddling around with paintings. I just love doing it. Sorry, I think probably my head was on the screen the entire time. Do I have a rooster in here? I could put a rooster in there, couldn't I? A little bit of this bright white in a few places. Okay, I think that's gonna be everything that needs to be done. I think I could just continue tooling around here for a while. Some brushes away. And Edie sounded like a rooster. Oh, Edie sounded like a rooster. Yes, she does. Think of like her as like some screaming eagle or something. Is it the 14th today? Yeah. Wonish. Anybody been to Lake Wonish? Where is Lake Wonish? I never even thought of looking that up. Okay. So it's definitely a little bit different than the original. If I go back here, I made some changes to help kind of just simplify things a little bit. There's little areas up here and up here, basically kind of where the painting that I've just invented, and I'm maybe not so happy with what I've invented, but there's, in fact, just get a little bit more. And a little gray. Okay, I think that's everything I can do here. I kind of like, I've just put a little bit of snow you see on the tops of these posts. A little bit of snow built up on the wire. I decided against going back into the water and darkening that. I could go back in here and make that building a little bit more blue, but I did not do that. Maybe I'll still got a little bit of paint here. It's just going to touch that. Okay, I think that's good enough. Last touch, I swear. Okay, so a couple other little things just about her biography. You know, I mentioned A.Y. Jackson and her were really, really good friends. A.Y. Jackson fell in love with her, he claimed in his autobiography, the first time they met, which was, I think, around 1923. It took him another, I think, about 13, 15 years for him to propose to her, but he proposed to her in a letter. Not the most romantic thing. And she declined his offer of marriage. She said, you know, we're really, really good friends. Why don't we just make it official? And her response was that she again, I mentioned before, she was really saw herself as an individual. She was a feminist, maybe before the term even existed. And she wrote back to him saying, I've spent my whole life trying to kind of make a name for myself, and I don't want to marry some guy and then forever live in that person's shadow, because by this point in the mid-1930s, A.Y. Jackson was about as much of a celebrity as an artist could be in Canada at the time. And so they maintained close friendship afterwards, and there is a huge archive of letters that they wrote back and forth together, her and Alexander Young Jackson. He lived beyond her. She died in, 71? I think he died in 74 or 78 or something. But in reflecting upon that, he still maintained that she was the love of his life. So neither of them married. Neither of them had children while they were alive, which is not a shame or anything. It's just a fact. So kind of like if you were to make a biography or a story about them, that relationship would play a big part of it, or at least it played a big part of A.Y. Jackson's thinking about things, maybe less so for her. I also didn't mention, I kind of hinted at it, but she's Anne Douglas Jackson, Anne, oh my goodness, that's a slip. Anne Douglas Savage, she devoted most of her life beyond making art to art education. And she's primarily known, I think, outside of art for her role in helping to reinforce the importance of childhood art education, or art in the classrooms, regardless of whether students are interested in becoming scientists or athletes or politicians or whatever. That art is fundamental to helping us develop all sorts of other skills, including dexterity, hand-eye coordination, and self-confidence, right? The more people are able to express themselves through art, the more capable they are about doing other things in their lives. So I think that's, quite a commendable thing for somebody to devote so much of their time and energy in towards fostering those goals. So she was, president of a number of different organizations that advocated for art education in the schools, as well as she founded an organization that helped train teachers to become better art teachers. Because maybe you've had the experience, at least I did when I was growing up, is that the same person who taught gym class also taught art class. And they were probably somebody who was an athlete that, was then, became a teacher, and then learned a little bit about how to make art from the textbook, right? And so she wanted to make sure that the people who were teaching art actually knew a little bit about how to make art and were passionate and enthusiastic about it, right? Because if your teacher's not particularly enthusiastic about making art, then the likelihood that you're going to embrace that same passion is very low, right? So even my own one, it's like kind of wondrous that anybody gets interested in making art when you have, not to denigrate teachers, obviously I'm a teacher myself and I come from a family of teachers, but you can only do so much. Like if I was to teach a gym class, for instance, guaranteed no one would become an athlete afterwards, right? However, if I was to teach art class, things might be a little bit different. Anyway, she was a long-time teacher in K through 12 in Montreal. She also taught for a while at McGill University, and was an administrator throughout as well. So beyond being a great artist, was also made maybe even greater contributions to Canadian culture and society, specifically in Quebec, for the public service that she did in exposing children to her passion and helping other people around her learn a little bit about her passion so that they can continue to share that. And after all, that's maybe the goal of most artists, is to inspire people and to kind of spread the word of art so that more and more people get making more art. And as I've said many times over this channel, if we lived in a world where more and more people, or everybody for that matter, was had a constructive way to express themselves through painting or drawing, ballet, dance, violin, guitar, poetry, journal writing, novel writing, on and on, acting, filmmaking, I think we would live in a much better world, right? So thank you very much, Anne Savage, for your contributions to Canadian culture and art and education in general. So, okay. I think I'm going to call it an evening there, my friends. So I would love to see the image that you guys created based on this. Did you use a warm color, a warm brown?